Like we're all on. So good evening, everybody, and welcome to Boothy'S Beer and Banter, sponsored by Magic Rock. Firstly, can I thank you all for joining us again tonight? We really appreciate you coming on. I know looking around, there's quite a few new faces. So just to let you know, if you want to ask a question, just press the raise your hand icon button, and I'll come to you as soon as possible. Or if you just want to write it in the chat, I'll read it. I say every week. It's laid back. It's a bit of fun. You can ask as many questions as you want, or you can just sit and listen to his guests. So I know you can see him, and I know his guest tonight, no introduction at all. I'm sure you listen to him every weekend. And well, to be fair, this season, midweek as well. I don't know how they've had time to come on tonight, but I really appreciate it. And I'm sure you all agree they do an absolute fantastic job, not just covering the match days, but covering the club in a whole. Obviously, we've got Mattie, Glennon and Paul Ogden. Evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, Boothy.
Good evening.
Wow, the pressure's on now. I'm really sweating.
But to be honest, I'm really looking forward to this. This is 20 years of you sticking a microphone in my face and me having to answer your questions. So tonight, you're here to answer all our questions. So I'm going to start with you Oggy. Obviously, how did you get into TV, radio, and the Huddersfield Town job? Was it something you wanted to do, and that was your main thing, getting work in football? And also, were you a Huddersfield Town fan before you started?
Wow, I'll have to give you two fairly shortish answers to both of those questions, Boothie, because they're both quite long stories, honestly. The first thing to say on professional life is that I didn't train academically as a journalist, as many people do now. I came into it through the alternative route, which is newspapers. So I started off as a newspaper reporter when I was very young, locally in the town I grew up in Lancashire. And I wrote a really snotty letter to the rugby league reporter, probably quite arrogant at the time, because I'd caught him in factual incorrectness, and I basically took him to task. I'm not proud of doing that, but that was my first in. And I went on to write for newspapers at university, and then I ended up working as a match reporter in adult life. And in newspapers, there are opportunities to network your way onto, contributions to radio, just like Stephen Chicken does so well now, like Mel Bruth and Dougie Thompson have done for us locally for so many years, and they're really brilliant pundits. I did that. And I kind of wormed my way into opportunities in radio. And it took me about 15 years, risky years professionally, to get into a position where I became a candidate for a BBC regional job. There is no such thing, to this day, there is no such thing as a full-time job at the BBC working as your Huddersfield Town correspondent. It's only part of my job. And I think a lot of you will know that already because I've explained that publicly. And what I do is I'm employed by BBC Yorkshire as a sport reporter, part of which, very flatteringly, is to still be selected as your matchday commentator for Huddersfield Town. And the other part of that, of course, is look north, camera work as a camera operator. When they're really desperate, you'll see me on screen with Paul Hudson and in the studio with the glamorous presenters. Have I been a Huddersfield Town fan all my life? No, definitely not. The short answer, again, I promise, Boothy, is I'm from a really big football-obsessed family, except me dad, who would be the first to admit he loathes football. So I relied on my granddad and my uncles, mainly, for my football matchday experience, even as a very little boy. And I was taken to a lot of different grounds, Bolton Wanderers, Manchester United, when I was a small boy. My granddad was a Yorkshireman, bless him. And he used to take me, because he was a Keighley lad, he used to take me to Burnley, Halifax, Huddersfield, although family law says I didn't like it when I first went. But the actual knowledge of Yorkshire and of football generally helped me to get a job in broadcasting in sport. So it was really helpful to come here, where I still am after all these years, and explain that I actually did know about Huddersfield to some extent, and it probably helped me to be competitive in the interviews. And now they can't shake me off. I love it so much. I even live in the town. My son was born in the town, and they can't get rid of me, basically, Boothy. And that's my life story.
So, and we don't want to get rid of you, Oggy. Definitely not. We want you to be there for many years to come. As I said, you do an absolute fantastic job, and I love listening to you both. Well, I love listening to you, Oggy. The other guy, I'm not so sure. It was all right. But Mattie as well. Just like anybody, Mattie, I better be careful tonight what I call you, Mattie. Everybody who's been in your company, and after about 2 or 3 sentences, the word Sam Allardyce always comes out. It must be your best friend, and I know you started at Bolton, so come on, here's your chance. Tell us a little bit about your start of your career at Bolton, and especially playing under Big Sam.
Well, I actually started a little bit at Blackburn back in the day when, because they picked me up first, but it was miles away from Stockport. My dad couldn't take me all the time. There was no way of me getting there, either on a Monday night for training. Bolton came along when I was 14, something like that, 14 I think it was. Fantastic youth team manager, Dean Crombie, a fellow there. And I just went through, progressed all the way through. YTS, fantastic. You'll remember, well, I was 40 quid a week. I think you were £27.50 when you were
£29.50.
£29.50, yeah, 45 quid, 40 quid, then 45 as a Premier League youth team player. No one believes you now when you say that. When I tell the young lads who come in the sauna or I speak to, I say I was on £40, then 45, £25 expenses as well to get from Stockport to Bolton every day. And it was just magnificent. It was absolutely fantastic. Roy McFarlane, Colin Todd were the joint managers when I joined, because Bruce Rioch had just gone down to join his disaster at Arsenal before Ian Wright kicked him out of Arsenal. And so those 2 managers came in. Again, it was just magnificent. It was just laugh after laugh, hard work, the boots, the toilets, the showers, you know what I mean? The full lot like you did as well in your YTS. But it was brilliant. Progressed through the youth team, started playing reserve team at 16, the Pontins League, which was obviously a man's league. Then it wasn't, you know, like the kiddies football that they play these days until the first team. And again, great characters in there. A tough football upbringing, but at the same time, I would never change a thing. And then Sam, which I very rarely mention, thank you, Rudy. Didn't come in till I think I was about 19, I think, when he came in. I was there a couple of years with him, but I was on loan all the time. But he was brilliant. He was brilliant. I did enjoy working for him because he was straight. He was a straight talker, straight manager. You knew where you stood with him. You know what I mean? He tried to drown me in a pool in America once, gave him some jip. You know what I mean? And yeah, it was great. Met up a few months ago at a charity event. And again, he's just a nice down-to-earth fella. But then, obviously, a lot happened between after Bolton, when my career actually took off. And I started playing league football, which led me to Huddersfield Town, which I've settled here as well, like Boothy. Loved my time there. I'm just going to show you something. The fresh face, Matt Glennon there. That's the day that I signed at the girl farm. My girl, she's 18 at 30th of this month. Same birthday as Mr. Ogden's wife.
Yes.
So it was.
Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah. Don't worry, I've got a present for you. And obviously I've stayed at the town, built my businesses here, working with Oggy all the time, and yeah, that's the short of it, really.
If I may say as well, Boothy, that does astound me what Mattie has said. This is detail, but the Bolton Wanderers team that I watched when I was a schoolboy included Sam Allardyce and Paul Jones, who ended up at Town, and Frank Worthington. And Peter Reid was in that team as well. And we, you know, this is the stuff that we sometimes discuss when we're in journeys together to our away games, because something has drawn us mysteriously both together into a town which in adult life we've both fallen in love with years ago and stayed in. And it's strange how circumstances that are very similar from different angles have brought us both together in Huddersfield.
Yeah, those Burndon Park days were special. Just a little point as well, and it's like the innocence of youth. I used to sit having a coffee, making a cup of tea for a fella. It was Nat Lofthouse. I didn't even know it was Nat. I didn't even know who he was. He's the line of Vienna. I didn't realise till years later he's like one of the biggest footballers, you know what I mean, of the country. Everything, in fact, but just a normal fella. Just Mr. President, you okay? Do you want a coffee? here's a coffee, because I used to get there early because my train got in early. And you just thinking, I think you're 16, 17 years old. You've got a legend there that you don't even know he's a legend because you're in your own little bubble, in your own little world, trying to make your way in football. And a few years later, you just have to think back to yourself. Did that really happened? Was I that nonchalant next to, somebody who's an absolute legend in football?
Yeah. But that's it. You do. I know we've got a few questions on the chat, but I know Ryan's got his hand up and he's had it for a while. Yes, Ryan, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Oh, he knows how to use it. Don't worry.
I do know how to use it. A question for Matt. I'm just curious to know, like, who was the best player that you played with and against, and why?
Best player I played with it was only in reserve team football, I have to admit, but it was Peter Beardsley. He came into Bolton when I was 18 years old, and again, a great fella, helped me out with, through the Old Testament to this, me kicking, wasn't always strong. But just, he's again another legend. He came in, he had a little belly on him, came around out big baskets of chocolate. I saw ever brought round, and he was too good for that club, even at 36, 37, and a stone overweight. Against, well, it's going to have to be that Chelsea game, isn't it? It's going to have to be Lampard, someone like that. Dennis Bergkamp, when he's still actually in my pocket when I played against him in the FA Cup many years ago. So I might let him out one day. So yeah, Bergkamps, Lampard, people like that, and just absolute legends of the game. And as we all know, mention it, Lampard still dines out on the fact he scored his 100th Chelsea goal past me, and his 101st about 5 minutes later.
No, you dine out on that, not Lampard. I'm sure
he dined out on that. I thought we got the Chelsea job back.
Cheers, Ryan. Thank you for that. And there's a question here, but I'll just ask the first question, and it's probably to you, Oggy, and then Mattie, the second one. We've not been in the stadium for 10 months. We listened to you. And how strange is it for you both to commentate? There's no fans, no atmosphere. You obviously make the atmosphere come through the radio and the iFollow for home games. But how difficult and how strange is it for you when you're used to 20, 15,000 fans around you every game?
You mean specifically about home games, Boothy?
Home games, yeah.
Yeah.
The question's going to come on to away games.
Well, I'm glad you've separated the two, home and away games, in these circumstances, because the answer is very different. I promise you that. Well, the answer to your question, from my point of view as commentator, Boothy, is a rather tragic shadow of its usual self. Our stadium with no fans in it, despite the hospitality that Anhoff and the team put on, and despite the presence of our VIPs and visiting dignitaries and scouts. That yelping in the background, by the way, is to some extent from Huddersfield Town's own staff members, but also from visiting directors. But that's the only atmosphere that anybody can create, apart from the players themselves. But one thing that has always kept me very much interested, to say the least, in the home game experience with our team is that natural atmosphere that is generated by the passion of the home fans. It peaked, of course, during the Premier League. And that brief existence that we had, stand up if you love the town, the fantastic efforts of the Cowshed. But actually, it's not just those people that we miss, because the natural warmth, occasional bad temper, instinctive, instant punditry on anything that happens from the people around us, very close to our commentary position. That's all part of the matchday experience, which, if you remember back long enough to before the COVID crisis, I've always used as a natural broadcasting tool. Sometimes the home fans, and particularly the away fans, when they're near our microphones, make my job easy when things are going well, because I can just shut up, point my microphone in the right way, direction, and let people do the talking for us. And that is quite an emotive broadcasting tool in itself. We get a lot of reaction from people who are listening, who are reacting with emotion and affection to the sound that town fans are making, whether it's home or away. That natural broadcasting tool has gone, especially in the away games, but the home games is particularly echoey and tragic. And I feel like we're improvising. It's a real privilege to do the job, even in these circumstances, especially so. But it's a shadow of its usual self, I must say, whether we're home or away.
I know we've got a lot of questions there, but Andy, you've got your hand up, so I'll come to you first.
Yeah, well, there's two questions. What first for Matt? Of the 3 penalty saves against Crewe, which was your best? And,
the best one. No, go on, sorry.
I'll wait for it. And would they have stood the scrutiny of VAR today?
The last one wouldn't have. No, I still remember it because it was one of my favourite memories of football, not just of Huddersfield Town, apart from the result, obviously. So yeah, I think the third one, because the referee had killed me by retaking the second one. So to grab the third one, and I caught it as well, just to rub salt in the wounds a little bit. So yeah, that was my favourite one. And I think I was only about 6 yards off my line when I saved it, so it wasn't too much.
and secondly, for Oggy, what research do you do to find the correct pronunciation of particularly of foreign players?
What research do I do? Well, I try and find out the correct pronunciation, and is the short answer. I mean, by a coincidence, when I was a very young bloke, I lived in Germany for quite a long time anyway. So it fell into my lap when suddenly a lot of German players and the manager arrived at our place. And I also still spend a lot of time in the Netherlands, Belgium. France is a place I need no persuasion to go to. So my own personal background probably does help me. And sometimes I get it wrong, by the way. I was famously taken the mickey out of with an Englishman who's playing for Derby these days, Jordan Ibe, the ex-Liverpool player, ex-Bournemouth, when I was told that the correct way to pronounce his name truly was eBay, not Ibe. That might be true from his heritage, but that's how I went with it in commentary all night. And oh my goodness me, the email that I got, the emails and the correspondence that I got that night were eye-watering. The foreign names, you need to, I can't speak for other commentators, but if you go into a game without knowing roughly who the opposition is going to consist of, then you're asking for trouble already. So you ought, in my role, on a good day, to have had a fair bit of self-guidance on how to pronounce the names of the opponents, as well as our own players when David Wagner was here.
Definitely. And I'm sure we'll come on to David later on, but a similar question actually to you, Matt, from Peter. What was Matt's secret for saving penalties? He only saved 3 in his career, they were all in one game, so he was an expert.
You know,
did you study beforehand or look at the player's eyes?
Well, now I've retired, I can give my secret out, obviously. You know what I mean? I don't have to wait for the book to come out. I looked at the player before he picked the ball up. Everyone's arguing with the referee, everyone's shouting and screaming and saying it wasn't a penalty, which I always thought was never a point doing that. There's no way I'm going to go up to a referee, explain what happened, and he turns around and says, oh, you know what, Matt? I think you're right. You get yourself a goal kick, and we're all right. We're all right. That's fine. So it's never going to happen. So I looked at the player who obviously was about to pick the ball up, see his little tells then before he did it, because as soon as he puts that ball down, he's in penalty mode. That's it. He's not looking left. He's not looking right. Or if he's doing, he's trying to give me the eyes. He's trying to do a little bit of trying to trick me into which way I think I'm going to go. So I used to look well before he put the ball on the spot, before he even knew that I was looking at him. And so it worked. It did work quite a few times, to be fair. So I had quite a decent career of saving penalties.
Just not coming out for crosses and collecting them. That thing.
Or saving shots in general. Yeah.
Exactly. And kicking the ball out as well. But apart from that,
throwing it. Yeah.
So, question from Peter Swallow, and it's to both of you, and it's a great question, but just be careful. We are in Huddersfield Town. So, Oggy and Matt, who is the best and worst managers you have dealt with, and why? You.
Is it me first? I missed that, Boothy. Me?
Who is the best and worst manager you've had to deal with? Presume Huddersfield managers, I presume we're asking.
Well,
who's been the best to work with?
The best. I've been spoiled, I'll tell you now. I think Pete probably means in terms of personal interaction and post-match interviews.
Yes.
A question which I understand, because I've had some more difficult than others. when in a bad mood. Stan Turnant was quite awkward to deal with. But Pete, and anybody else who wants to know the answers to that question, you've got to remember something really, really important about why I'm there holding the microphone in the first place. I'm in the business of making radio. I'm finding out what the truth is. I am convinced to this day that I had a bigger audience for my post-match interviews with Stan Turnant than with anybody else, with the possible exception of David Wagner. And I'll tell you why, and this really did happen. A lady came up to me on Huddersfield railway station during the Turnant era, and it was only short, and said, Paul, we've never spoken before. You don't know me, but my husband's a fanatical Huddersfield Town fan. Who is that man who keeps being rude to you on a Saturday tea time? I listen now. I'm not bothered about the football, but who is he? And I'm sure that there are many, many other people who listened in, because in terms of radio making, without really meaning it to be, it was absolute gold, because Stan, and he had some reason at the end of his tenure with us to be grouchy, came up with all sorts of stuff that you wouldn't normally say to a radio reporter. But contrary to popular myth in Huddersfield, certainly, I was never threatened with violence by Lee Clark. People routinely still ask me that. Never. And, you know, we exchange texts now. He was very emotional, Lee, particularly after matches when we should have done better. So was Stan Turnant. David Moyes at Preston North End, I had a very prickly relationship with before I came to Yorkshire, and I was working at BBC Radio Lancashire. But in the business of radio making, as long as you're discussing the truth and having a reasonably grown-up discussion about a match which is about to take place or has just taken place, then I'm still doing my job as a radio maker. So I'm not there, Pete, to be the manager's best mate. I shouldn't be. And I find it really cringeworthy when I hear radio reporters, including myself sometimes, falling foul of the rule that you should never be too pally with a manager, really.
Brilliant. Cheers, Harry. Thank you. Mattie, who were your best manager at the club then? I'm going on a player side, and you can even say your worst if you want.
Well, Lee Clark, obviously. I couldn't stand the man. But apart from that, so no, really, really enjoyed Peter Jackson. Jacko was brilliant. You know what I mean? That picture reminds me of Jacko, because as we walked in, so we took that picture, that was for the Examiner. Alana obviously told you that's a long now, 2006. He gave Alana a picture of himself to put in a book, a signed picture of himself to put in her little school bag that she brought with her that day. So, you know what I mean? Jacko was brilliant. You know what I mean? It's to this day, he still doesn't know that he used to drink all his wine on the way on Friends when he fell asleep. You know, and then Andy Ritchie was great. Training was great. It was lively. Again, you know what I mean? It was good, but obviously I was playing, so I'm gonna enjoy it more. And Stan was just crazy. Stan was brilliant. You know what I mean? You go practice your kicking. Get yourself in. What are you practicing your kicking for? Because I need to. Get in. Well, okay, then you practice that, and I'll decide who's playing Saturday. Kick one bad ball, sort your kicking out, and that'd be the first thing you'd shout. So, from an interesting point of view, you know, I mean, I was 30 years old when Stan came in, so you know, I've been around to handle him, and obviously we had a couple of fallouts, which was good because straight away we made up. So for me, Jacko, brilliant. You know what I mean? Andy Ritchie, great. Really enjoyed it. We had our cup run and that as well with Andy Ritchie. Obviously, the club not financially quite there yet to start bringing enough players in to really push on for him. So it was a real shame. And Stan for probably all the wrong reasons, because it was just funny. I don't just remember Boothy'S as well, just a quick one. When for pre-season with Stan, we used to run up to the changing rooms at Stalls Hall to try and break our record of the shortest training day in the history of pre-season. I think we got there once. Luke Beckett got there at 10 to 12. We started at 10:30. It's pre-season. I mean, Rocky didn't need to bother washing the kit because we've not even got a sweat on. Oh, it was funny.
I'll say this.
Sorry, okay.
Just to finish on this subject, Andy, I would also say, just going back to Stan Turnant, who's one of the most maligned of our recent managers in Huddersfield Town's recent history. In terms of my dealings with him, he really helped me in an episode before I came to Yorkshire when I was at Lancashire, because I covered Burnley's matches as well. He was the Burnley manager then. And I had one of those terrifying episodes for a quite inexperienced reporter, where the kit that I was recording a pre-weekend interview on a Friday morning, it must have been, the kit failed. So the interview didn't record. And even though he could walk on water in Burnley back in the day, he was still a bit grumpy sometimes first thing on a Friday morning before he'd had his cup of tea. So having interviewed him and found out after I'd said goodbye to him that I had no interview after all, I would have faced, probably some kind of disciplinary measure when I got back to the studio in Blackburn at Radio Lancashire. So as somebody who was trying to make their way in the trade, it was quite a volcanic moment for me. I had to go back to the office and politely ask Stan, quite sheepishly, whether I could repeat the whole interview, which on Radio Lancashire back in the day, that was about 10 minutes worth. That is the last thing that Stan wanted to do. He absolutely ripped the mickey out of me. He had himself, Ronnie Jepson, and Andy Payton, who was playing for Burnley at the time, laugh at me. But because of what's in his heart, I always suspect he actually did do the interview again. And I think career-wise, back then, he probably, without realising it, helped me. So I will defend Stan Turner against what anybody says because of how I think he is deep down. On the radio, he helped me make some really, really good radio with his post-match interviews for all the wrong reasons.
Brilliant. Cheers, Ollie. And I'm just going to go, I know there's more questions, but Mattie, I'm just going to go back to you. And you were talking about pre-season, and you mentioned Stan's pre-seasons. What about Jacko taking us to Ibiza on a pre-season tour to Ibiza? I could understand at the end of the season, there must have been some stuff that went on over there. Can you spill the beans on anything?
It was like red rag to a bull. You took 20 lads to Ibiza. But the thing is, we didn't go to like some lovely little village in Ibiza to train. Went to San Antonio. It's like, we're in a hotel in the middle of San Antonio. But we can't do anything. We can't drink. We can't do anything. And we didn't. We had one night. We had to be in at 12 o'clock. Which I had to say, apart from a couple of people, everybody did. But it was absolutely crazy. Well, I took it as a little mini holiday. I just got married, come back from Mexico, then worked really hard to get my wedding weight and everything else off for pre-season. So we go, and I've got myself a Lilo. I've got myself a mint chocolate chip ice cream, and I'm just dangling across in the pool. And I see Jacko walk past me with Taff just looking and go, oh my God. Because I'd only just signed, didn't know, he'd only known me for a week. And that's it. And I'm floating around the pool with a mint chocolate chip ice cream on my Lilo. And then for these two lads, again, Boothy loves this one. For the two lads that did break the rules that night, I'm not going to name them.
Go on, name them.
We had a punishment. We had a punishment, didn't we? So we had to go down to the beach in the morning, and we had to just do stupid swimming. But I was a little bit late that morning because I was getting ready. And all the lads were waiting. But again, I walked down, and I've got my Lilo underneath my arm, and I can see Taff's face because I've got this bloody Lilo. But I'm thinking, I'm not walking back up 7 flights of stairs again to get my Lilo when we finish swimming. I'm bringing it with me. And I just remember the faces then as well. And that was also the time where John Worthington was swimming. He's only a little fella, you know what I mean? He's not great at swimming. And he's going backwards and forwards, his little arms, breathing really heavy. And we filled his water bottle up with seawater. We poured his Lucozade bottle out, and we filled it with seawater. Oh, it was brilliant. He got out. He's an angry little man anyway, when he's training and playing. And he took this massive big swig of this seawater. Oh, it just went everywhere. It was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, it was good. It was a good few days, that was. Good few days.
And there's still one more about Pav and probably one of the coaches, the recent coaches now, but we're not going to mention that one, are we, Mattie, until...
No, because we didn't do it because we were elder pros. We were elder pros. So, yeah, I think Pav got himself a little bit of a squeeze on the way home after getting a bite to eat. And, yeah, some of the locals didn't take to him very much. And I think there was a melee that went on. Why couldn't we bother standing up? So me and you just sat there with Mel Booth. I think we were having a cold beer. It was early. We were allowed to have a beer before we went back. And they were all doing whatever they were doing. We were just sat chilling and having a pint. It was quite nice. It was peaceful because everyone laughed.
It was. But I think by the sounds of it, Brookie were lucky. The kit man were lucky to get back alive, wanted by the sounds of it. That's all we'll say. We can't say anything else about that.
No. A lot of crazy locals are good. You don't know what's going to go on. So, yeah. I'm sure their story is different to ours.
There were machetes and everything, weren't we? But we won't say anything.
No.
Next question from Richard, and it's to Oggy. What was the first match that you commentated on for Town, and what do you remember of it?
Oh,
this is testing you.
Oh, that's a good one. The first match I commentated on, proper commentary, and it was only little chunks because of the circumstances of the day, was a tie, an FA Cup tie that people might remember at Wrexham, at the racecourse ground, and we drew. We drew, and I think I'm right in saying that Ian Rush was playing for them. And didn't Tom Cowan hurt his knee badly that day? We beat him in the replay back at our place. I was just trying to get my foot in the door here at BBC Radio Leeds. We didn't do commentaries all the time then. And because it was a cup tie and other games were not particularly interesting, I think they threw to us. And that was the first commentary I did for Town of any kind. And that must have been January 1999. Kids, ask your dad when that was. It's a long time ago. If anybody wants to correct me, I quite possibly might have got my dates wrong, but I think that's right, brother.
They will correct you on this chat if you are wrong, Oggy.
Oh yeah,
about that. So for you, Mattie, it's from Ian. Why do you think the results have gone so poorly since Christmas?
I think I don't like to give a simple answer, and people know that I'll always give an honest answer. I think the amount of players that are missing from Carlos Corberan's squad is ridiculous, and the length of injuries. We don't know where they come from. I'm not going to speculate on anything because I don't think that helps. But you Toffolo's out, your captain Jonathan Hogg, your main captain Schindler's out, your drivers of the team, Karoma, who started the season exceptional, your top goal scorer until I think Campbell took over him recently. In a small squad, a big squad. It's a big squad, but your senior players, your quality players, it's quite a small squad. Really, you can't afford to have that many players missing. It's tough, and no team with a squad, no club with a squad that size can survive. In that many injuries. Stearman out as well, and I'm a big fan of Stearman. I think he does well. Very well. You can see I'm trying to grow my hair. I like Stearman as well at the minute. In a consolidation for him, and I just think that is as basic as that. Tactics haven't changed, things haven't changed, personnel have changed. The players coming in not quite experienced enough yet, not up to the standard of who they're missing, and I think it's to not go on too much about other things. I think that's the basics of it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I totally agree with you, Mattie. I really do. I'm going to move on to the next one because we've got loads to get through, and it's from Daniel, and I'll do this one to you, Oggy. If you could bring a past Town player back to strengthen the team, who would it be and why?
Oh, God.
Present company.
Present company accepted.
Yeah.
Oh.
Means himself there, by the way. Not me.
Yeah, no, I don't mean you, mate. Yeah.
There are lots. If I've got to pick one,
it's
difficult off the top of my head. I'd probably say Marcus. Stewart, but I've had a lot of favourites and a lot of players that I've really admired. Dean Gorey. There are loads, but Marcus was a real magical player, wasn't he, in that team?
Yeah. What a fantastic player he was, wasn't he? And I agree with what I've seen over the last 21 years, Oggy. I'd have to say Stewie as well. And Stewie's joining us next week. And just a little plug for Boothy'S and Banter, sponsored by Magic Rock next week. Marcus Stewart and Wayne Allison's joining us next week. So moving quickly, I'm going to try and get through all these to both of you. And it's from Andrew. As a commentator and a player or fan, what's been your favourite ground? And I'm going to move that on a bit. Obviously, you had 2 years in the Premier League, and I know how we treated our press in the Championship, in the First Division, and then as soon as we got in the Premier League, you were having 3-course meals and everything, red wine, whiskies at the end. I've seen you. I saw you. So, what were the best in the Premier League? Who looked after you the best, and what were your favourite ground?
Go on, Mattie.
Well, I'd say Leicester was one of them. You had the doors open for you. You know what I mean? The bar was nice. The media lounge was nice and close to the to where we sat. They brought the food at half time to you. You know what I mean? Come nice hot pies, a coffee and everything for you. Had loads of space. You know what I mean? Just ridiculous amounts of space. We're all spread out. We can get our work done. You know what I mean? Like whereas at Brentford, you've got your knees in your mouth and you know what I mean, and bruising everything, trying to squeeze in there at those sorts of grounds. So I enjoyed Leicester. Obviously, Tottenham was just out of this world. But one thing about Tottenham, where me and Oggy sat and the other press, we were miles away from the lounge. There's no going getting a coffee. There's no anything else. You can't get back because you've got to go through 2 breweries, 10,000 fans, back down the stairs, through again. Where bloody Mel Booth was sat, my God, it was like a king's palace where he walked out to, right next to the lounge. So for impressiveness, you've got to say amazing. But Wembley, obviously we went to Wembley for Tottenham and obviously the playoff final as well, but actual league football. So yeah, there's some big ones there. Your old-fashioned grounds, I love the walk to Fulham. Me and Oggy like to get trains and we like to go on undergrounds and we like to navigate our way through London all the time. And you come off the underground at Fulham and you walk past the houses, through the park, down the river. And we always say at one point we are stopping off there. We're going to have a glass of something nice and sit on that blooming river and just have you know what I mean, I have 10 minutes before we get on our train. So there's a few for me.
Brilliant. Okay, do you want are they the same for you?
Yeah, Chelsea would be one of my favourites, even though the commentary position is quite low down. The advantage of that is you're really close to the benches and the players. And that wonderful day when we stayed up at the end of the first Premier League season, we could see Conte, if you remember, he was their manager, really losing it with the players. So we could see why they were maybe presenting us with an opportunity. There was a lot of intimacy between what was going on at the side of the pitch and our particular commentary position. West Ham was a real disappointment, an absolute heartbreaker because you're so far away from the pitch at the London Stadium now. Liverpool, they've changed the commentary position, so we were too far away. It felt as if we were detached from it all. But it depends really from a technical point of view on operational things and whether we can see the pitch well enough and what we can see going on, as well as being influenced by the event itself.
Brilliant. Cheers, Oggy. Thank you. And this is a quick question for you, Oggy. I'll read it all out. It's quite a lot. You do a great job with the managers post-match with the interviews. Is there ever a chat pre-interview? For example, do ever the managers ask you beforehand, off the record, as to questions they don't want you to ask them?
Yes, that does happen. Or sometimes it is the case where a manager might just ask me outright what you're going to ask me. But as a professional journalist, you wouldn't really say yes to that request because that's not what we're there for. As sometimes, as a matter of courtesy, if there's been a really tragic event, a bereavement of some kind, or something that's a bit personal, then you might, as a matter of courtesy, warn the manager that you're going to ask them that in advance of switching your microphone on, because the thing that you don't want is dead air. As a live radio maker, and I think most of you have worked out by now that post-match these days at home games, I interview Carlos and his predecessors live on a live radio mic. You don't want them to walk away in disgust, although that would be very dramatic. I'd still rather have a conversation with somebody. So there are subtle ways you can avoid dead air, but pre-rehearsed conversations, I'm not in that business.
Brilliant. Cheers, Oggy. Thank you. And next question from Siobhan. Question for Matt. Obviously, Ryan Schofield's coming. How do you think he started? And obviously, you've seen him for a good few years now. And how do you think his development's going to be this season?
I think he started very strong. Obviously, he was getting points. They were doing it. I think he's had a couple little bits in the middle, and then I thought he was fantastic against Swansea the night with the saves he made in the first half. I think his distribution's good. I know people like to have a moan, but for some reason, everybody likes to moan about keepers kicking, yourself included as well. When I think he's very brave on the ball when the ball comes back to him, I wouldn't do some of the things. I know I wouldn't do that, what he does, but that's the way that the team play. So I think he's brave on the ball. I think with the way the team's been struggling a little bit after Christmas, I think maybe, coming off his line a little bit has been a little bit, you know, in off key at times. But nothing drastic. You know, maybe one, maybe two goals he's been involved in. I'd say two. One cost him nothing because the game was already gone. One way he didn't come off his line quick enough. And apart from that, you know what I mean, a lad coming into the first team, into a difficult team, I think he's done well and he's going to get stronger. You know, we've seen the reactions. He's not just a shot stopper, as some people like to say. He's got much more to that. And it's just about playing. I want him to lose his place because he had to play through this. It wasn't even a sticky spell. It was just a couple of instances within a game that just you went a little bit, but didn't do anything. Nothing came of it. You know, nothing came of it. So work through it. He can be at the club for a long time as number one. And yeah, he's just got to work through, you know, a few little bits of his game. But I'm sure are doing that all the time when they're assessing the matches afterwards.
Brilliant. Cheers, Mattie. Thank you. And this is from Ryan to you, Oggy. What advice would you give to an aspiring young journalist that wants to make it in football doing broadcasting?
Oh, God. Well, I'm really flattered and slightly alarmed to be asked that, actually, Ryan. So thank you. And I'm definitely no careers advisor, by the way, as I told you earlier. But I'm not being self-effacing when I say this. The true answer is that I'm quite an old-fashioned version of what you might call a football commentator, because these days it's almost as important. It might even be more important, depending on your employer, to have quite a big social media profile, which I haven't got. So you need to nurture yourself a social media profile to go with your commentating and broadcasting skills. I would stay quite broad in your approach, and I wouldn't. There's a long answer to this, which we might do another time, Ryan. But the other thing I would say is don't paint yourself in too narrow a corner in terms of the team that you follow. It's been okay for me because I was old when I came into the industry. But if you're young and aspiring, keep your options open, but definitely concentrate on social media, because these days you can't just be a radio commentator. Well, you can, but you'll end up destitute and lonely, like me.
Okay, thank you. And Andrew's wanting you to name and shame the curfew culprits in Ibiza, Mattie, but we'll move quickly on there. We're not going to mention them. Joe, Mattie, how do you feel about the phone-ins after the match? I spoke to you a few times and come across very well and very upbeat, but the fact we keep losing at the minute is difficult to speak about.
I must admit, obviously, the phone-ins have only come in the last year or so. I always wanted to do that. I love it because I listen to a lot of radio. I listen to a lot of other broadcasters when I'm in the car, when we're about. Because obviously, we do a lot of travelling around as well. And I love it when they come on. Cause in case you might not have noticed, I do like to give my opinion now and again as well. So when people come on, I like it when they disagree with me. I like it when they agree with me. When they get beat and it's a run of maybe 3 games without a win, that hour is the longest hour of my life, because Oggy deserts me. He goes and gets himself a coffee and has a nice comfy chat with the manager. The coaches, probably finds himself a biscuit somewhere. So I'm left on my own. Obviously, Catherine sometimes is with me, but away games, I'm on my own, sat there, and the calls are coming through. And not to be disrespectful to anyone at all, but when nothing different has happened, it's very hard to keep the hour really lively, I think. You know what I mean? I've had Ryan on before. They can see I've had Andy on plenty of times as well. I mean, fellas that I know. So we can bring a more personal element to it, because we can talk about things and, you know, and fire off each other. But I find it hard when I run of bad games, because you don't want to just be critical all the time. Because being critical all the time is boring. Who wants to be critical all the time? You just, especially the world right now. And say you've mentioned social media and things like that. I don't want to be critical all the time. I don't want to be having to go at people all the time, because why? There's no point of it. But when you've lost 3 games and it's been horrendous, it's very hard to find a positive. So I don't like it then. I don't like it so much then. But when things are great and they're winning, and like the Swansea game, the Cardiff game the other day, the hour just flies by. Everyone comes on. There's always a few critics, because that's the world we live in. Someone will find fault in anything, no matter how good the game was. So it's very different for me, that last hour. I know what's coming when they got beat a few times, but then I know what's coming when they've had a great result. And yeah, so that's why I love doing the job. You know what I mean? That's why I love doing it, because it is just a mix all the time. And everybody is different with their opinions. Sometimes I think, wow, you are a million miles away. You have watched a different game than me. Even Ryan put it on the other day on Twitter. He's not watching a different game from me, which I thought was a scandal. As well, he got a message back from me and all. Yeah, but it's great, but it's very different depending on result.
And you're right, it's all about opinion. I can remember when I was at Sheffield Wednesday, there used to be a praise and grumble. So if I had a good game, I'd put it on, driving home, and I'd be listening. I'm thinking, I'm going to get praised. But it's amazing how many grumbles you got, and there were so many people slaughtering you, and you're practically in tears coming driving, and it's great for viewers and that for players. You can't listen to it, and that's what it is. And it's all about opinions, Mattie, isn't it? You're absolutely correct.
Exactly, it is, and you can think. Do you remember like News of the World? You scores and News of the World, and you'd run to Sunday morning. You've had a great game. 5 was he even at the game like that? But then you'll have a bit of a stinker. You'll go and get News of the World again. 7, that'll do. Thank you. Yeah, it was obviously there. I did all right. I did all right that day. So yeah, it is all opinions, and that's why I love this job. Thick-skinned, enjoy opinions, and that's what the world's about.
Yeah, brilliant. Do you know what? We've got about 15 questions, and looking at the time, we're not going to be able to get through them. But I've mentioned him earlier, Ogden, and it's a question for me, really. David Wagner, I presume you must have been one of the first ones to interview him. He's changed the club on and off the field forever. He's made an unbelievable difference, obviously. Got us into the Premier League. Did you sense something special about him then first few days?
No, I didn't sense anything special about him, Andy, although I think I gave him an unfair advantage as a person because I always give the Germans a chance because they made me so welcome when I was a young bloke and I lived over there working as a teacher before I got into broadcasting. So I wasn't very objective or professional when I first met David Wagner. I was just fascinated that he would take a job which looked like a really difficult job when he replaced Chris Powell. I thought, wow, he's ambitious, and so's Dean Hoyle. Hiring him in the first place. So what he struck me as was a very interesting and very pleasant human being before we found out what his coaching abilities were, Boothy, because David Wagner is well-travelled. He's got a quite diverse personal background, if you remember. He was quite happy to talk about holidays, his daughter's career plans. One of his daughters, if you remember, has gone into broadcasting or went into broadcasting anyway. While he was over here. So you could have a conversation with David Wagner about lots of things other than Huddersfield Town. I think that came across with everybody when he first arrived and endeared him to the whole of our audience, which snowballed anyway once he got out of the team and made him so good. So it was just a fascinating prospect to work with. I didn't sense anything special because there was nothing to sense as far as I was concerned about the footballing side of what you're asking about, Boothy, because nobody really knew what he was capable of. The chemistry he produced with that lot of players, a lot of whom had been told by previous employers that they were no good, was absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
Brilliant, Oggy. Thank you. And another question for you, Oggy, and I was doing a little bit of homework. You won't think I do, but I was looking through your Wikipedia bit. That's all I do. It's only Wikipedia. Yeah.
So it must have been a pop-up book.
No, and you must have been interviewed, and it were your 5 favourite town matches to commentate on.
Oh yeah,
and you didn't pick any Premier League games, which I thought the Chelsea game, the last game of the season, well, second to last game, might have been there, but 3 of them were the playoff finals and semi-finals, which is obviously understandable, and the other 2 was the Barnsley game, the last game of the season where we drew 2-2.
Yes.
And obviously where the lads were just stood around, and the Birmingham game in 2001 where we got relegated.
Sorry, you were playing in that, weren't you?
I was, yeah, and I missed an absolute sitter 5 minutes to go. Kenny Hines put a great header, and I should have buried it. Would have drawn and would have stayed in. And it just made me interested. Why did them 2 games stand out in particular as good commentary?
Well, the first thing to say, Andy, is that 5's quite a stingy number because there are so many memorable ones besides the ones. And I did that usual thing where I named my 5 and went through them all in detail. And afterwards, I was kicking myself for hours thinking, why didn't I mention that other game? The answer to your question is quite simple, Boothy. It's about the emotion. that the match and the event itself generates. And my job is to try and convey that emotion. And you'll have to take it from me to be describing a live sports event with people in increasing states of emotion and ultimately tears around you was quite a powerful experience for me. And that's why I picked the Birmingham City defeat on that final day of the season, because it was quite an unlikely set of circumstances that could have taken us down in the first place. Yes, we had to lose, but for all the other teams around and above us to win at the same time, that was the only set of circumstances which could have taken us down, if I remember rightly. And you could see people listening to the transistors. You could see people listening to us and reacting to it. And you could see horror building on people's faces. Some of the kids I saw in tears are grown-ups now, and they'll probably get in touch having remembered it themselves. But the short answer to your question, Boothy, is it's the amount of emotion that I found myself in the middle of that made it such a powerful experience, and therefore one of my top 5, even though it wasn't the outcome that I wanted.
And then the Barnsley one, just how difficult was that? Because nothing would happen in the last 15 minutes.
No, but the first thing to say is Barnsley, I absolutely love our derbies against Barnsley because of how close it is to us. I feel that it's a lot closer a derby than some of the other derbies you might name in Yorkshire. So I was all pent up for it beforehand. There was so much at stake, and you could feel the afternoon increasing in its dramatic content with every goal that was scored. They scored first, we equalised, they went 2-1 up, and then that end bit where the keeper was refusing to get the game going again when he had the ball at his feet, and the two managers talking to each other, David Flitcroft and Mark Robbins. I've just never seen anything like that before. So it was impossible not to have that in my top 5.
Brilliant. And just there's one asking about Carlos, and unfortunately everybody on this call, apart from obviously you two and Sam, obviously the cam Zoom guy, goes to games. So and I've heard a lot about Carlos's enthusiasm during the game. Do that for 90 minutes? Like, is it non-stop for 90 minutes? And does he shout to the players in English, or is it a bit of English, Spanish?
From what I can gather, he shouts to the players in English, and he's very animated. I'll probably get told off for racial stereotyping now, but he's like a lot of Spanish people and football people that I've met, because he's just very emotional. And he never, I know why he's in such great nick, because he never stops moving. He must burn a lot of energy during a match, I'll tell you now. But it's because he wouldn't want to hide his emotions. David Wagner was a bit like that, and he's the opposite of Hispanic. So I think it's just the way that they deal with that drama and that emotion that I'm talking about. Even I move about in the commentary box, but Carlos Corberan is never still during a match. And it's all in English as far as I can gather.
Brilliant. Cheers, right? We've just got a couple more questions. Mattie, well, for both of you really, what was going through both your minds when the final whistle blew at Chelsea and we stayed up? Well, during that game, what an emotional game that must have been for both of you.
Yeah.
Mattie.
It was fantastic, just the way they played, and you saw Di Proctor absolutely bully Willie Caballero. You could see as Di Proctor was going towards the goal. I don't like to say this as a goalkeepers union, but Willie Caballero just absolutely cracked himself. You could see he thought, I'm not getting hit by this fella. And he sort of went a little bit in with it. Ball comes loose, back of the net. Absolutely brilliant. And yeah, it was fantastic. And obviously, fans were there, left-hand side. I think there was a few more Huddersfield Town fans in there than probably should have been in there in different areas, but everyone was just diving around there. I remember after the game, it was a bit like playing. You know, Boothy, when you've been to a big event, a big game, and it's finished, and you get that, and you're knackered, you're exhausted. We went for a beer just down the road from the ground because we stayed in a hotel down the road, and exhausted. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, it was so enthralling the game, and just all the emotions that came with it. It was just unbelievable, because it was a long day, it was a hot day as well, and to see him do that to Chelsea as he went round him, because it was like in slow mo, because he had that time to go round and thinking he's going to do it, bang, back of the net. yeah, it was just a really good evening.
Okay, have you got anything to add to that, or?
Well, only briefly, insofar as I've described before tonight, guys, you know, when there's something common about what we're doing at the big games that we all remember, and that is we're very conscious while we're on air of how much it means to so many people back home. So if it's an away game that we're describing, you can sense how much it means to our families, neighbours, the whole town, because it's a town that supports its own club. And to be slightly self-indulgent about it, I just knew that everybody was so looking forward to going through it all again and having all these big name players at Leeds Road, at our stadium, at least once next season. It was quite a moment. It felt like a privilege that was coming again, a repeat season.
Yeah, and I think that was one of my highlights in football. We were on pedal for pounds. We were in France, and Dean were obviously still he'd gone to Chelsea, so he joined us later on the bike ride. So Dean got us a code to watch it. So there was all the cyclists, 180 of us, in a youth hostel, watching on a bed sheet. And there's Janet sat next to me, and my God, I've never seen emotions that poor thing she had to go through, and didn't realise, but it was about 6 minutes behind the live game, and some of the lads had it on the phones and they're all cheering, and when final whistle gone, but the whistle had 6 minutes to go, and Janet wouldn't believe anybody that we'd stayed up, and the emotions that night. And you remember, it was a fantastic night for everybody, wasn't it? But to be in France and the emotions for everybody, it was absolutely brilliant. It's
not doing me any good talking about these Premier League events, Boothy. You've got to move on. Change the subject.
Soon again, Oggy. They'll soon come back, I promise you. Final one for you then, Oggy. And it's just has anybody ever, and I know you've mentioned it, but has anybody ever walked away from you? Has anybody thrown the mic and walked away from you mid-interview?
I don't think they have. It would be a professional disaster, except if it was a live TV. I guess if it was a pre-recorded TV interview, it would still look very dramatic. So it wouldn't be such a bad thing on TV. But on a radio interview, it would be a bit of a professional disaster. And I'm pleased to say I don't think anybody's ever done it. I really don't.
That's brilliant. Lads, I'd just like to say, it's 8 o'clock. It's absolute flown by. And I know you've got to go back to work again. I really appreciate you joining us. Can I just say before, Ryan, who asked us a question and asked a couple of questions tonight, is hosting a Proud Terriers YouTube event tomorrow at 6 p.m. It's sharing his journey. So if anybody wants to join him, you get in touch with Ryan. Is it Ryan? Is it get in touch or just watch it? You can watch it live, can't you?
Thank you so much. It'll be on our YouTube channel. So if you just type in Proud Series onto YouTube, you'll find it straight away. So thank you.
Brilliant, Ryan. Thank you for that. And also, I'd just like to thank everybody for tonight. I can't believe how quick it's gone again. Just like to, I know Rachel's mentioned it in the email, Magic Rock are our sponsors, and they've offered everybody on the call today and everybody watches it on YouTube a 10% discount. All you have to do is go on the website and type in the discount code is Boothy, and that's there for you. And I know you're writing that down, Mattie. You shouldn't forget that. And also, there's a competition going on social media every week. Look out for it. It'll probably be on Monday when this airs. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us. Like I said, Marcus Stewart and Wayne Allison is our guest next week, talking about the Great Escape era. But again, can I thank Mattie and Oggy? They've been absolute. And Oggy, to give up your time for an hour like that to listen to, we really appreciate.
Pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure.
On Saturday, hopefully the next time we join us, next Thursday, we've got 6 points against QPR and Sheffield Wednesday. Thanks, everyone, and I'll see you all later. Bye.